Hi, my name is Jeff from Faymonville Trailers and I'm here to teach you some tips and tricks about the use of the HighwayMax. This block is used to keep the bottom plate centered in the fifth wheel. After we connect the truck to the trailer, we have to tighten up this nut just to make sure that this plate will always stay in the same position as the fifth wheel. When we want to hook up our trailer, we can adjust the height of the fifth wheel by pushing down or pulling this lever, number S1. After we adjust the height, we can come backwards with the truck. Yep. Always make sure that your fifth wheel is closed securely. To turn on the ignition, turn the key to the right and start the pony motor on top of the gooseneck. After that, you can pull this button or push this button to increase the RPM or lower the RPM. This lever over here can shut off the steering of the front three axles. If you lower it down like this, you will see on the sticker here the black bar pointing downwards is this black bar pointing downwards over here. This will mean you have no steering on the front three axles of the trailer. If you pull this bar up, the front axles will follow your truck. Here we can see 4 gauges. The 2 first gauges are there, you can see it on the sticker here, for the front 3 axles. This will give you the pressure on the steering of the front 3 axles. To operate the trailer safely, they have to be at least at 35 bars, both of them. The next 2 gauges are for the rear 3 axles. If there is no pressure, you have to steer the trailer to the left and to the right. You can do that with those 2 buttons. First of all, you start the pony motor, you turn this key button to the right. You can see here a steering wheel on the button. That means the manual steering is active. By pushing here left, right, the axles will steer left and right, and you will receive pressure on the front steering. For the rear steering, you do exactly the same. You push this button to steer the rear axles to the left and the right. Then you will have pressure on those 2 gauges. It's very important that you turn this button on 0 before you start to drive. If you don't do that, the steering could possibly steer left or right on moments you don't want it to turn. So switch on to 0 before you drive, switch on to steering if you want to control the steering manually. This button over here can switch on the lights below the gooseneck. If you're working in the dark, you can have some lights to work safely. This light over here will indicate red if the middle steering has lower pressure than 35 bar. In that moment, you will have to steer the middle steering to the left and to the right. You can see it on the gauges in the middle model behind the axles. This lever over here, CG, controls the compensation between the axles and the gooseneck. If you put it upwards, you have compensation with the hydraulic gooseneck and the front 3 axles. If you pull it downwards, the gooseneck will be separated from the front 3 axles. That will mean you can operate the gooseneck only without any effect on the first 3 axles. This lever over here, FWL, means more or less weight on the gooseneck. So if you put it downwards, you can see on the sticker over here, black bar pointing downwards, you will have only little weight on the gooseneck. If you pull it upwards, you have more weight on the gooseneck. This is a difference that is made between the gooseneck and the front 3 axles. So the moment we will put less weight on the gooseneck, we will have more weight on the first 3 axles. When you disconnect the gooseneck, we always put this lever up. Above these three levers, you can find the number 8 valve. This represents the 4 or 3-point suspension. Always put the valve open in 3-point suspension when you drive on the road. This button over here, if you turn it to the right, you will slow down the speed. If you turn it to the left, you will increase the speed. In here we have 5 gauges. This is FR, front right suspension. FL, front left suspension. Here we have RR, is rear right suspension. RL means rear left suspension. In the middle we have P, that means pump. Then we have 3 levers over here. If CG is closed down, we can control the gooseneck only with this lever. We will use that when we unhook the trailer. If CG is up, we can control the front suspension by sliding this one to the right, opening the front suspension, and moving it downwards or upwards with one of those 2 levers. The front suspension is connected left to right. This basically means that if you use this lever or this lever, it doesn't matter. To control the rear suspension, we close this one, we slide this to the left, open the rear suspension, and we use the same levers to do the rear suspension. Push the left one to do the rear left, push the right one to do the rear right. If you're loaded and all the axles are on the ground, before you drive, make sure that all the levers are up, and then you can go. Between the 4th and the 5th axle, you can find the control panel of the middle steering model. If you push both levers to the inside, you will steer the middle model only. If you pull both levers to the outside, you can control the rear model only. If you want to drive on the streets or steer both models, middle and rear together, you push the one on the inside to the inside, you pull the one on the outside to the outside. Here you can find M5 and M6, the 2 gauges of the center model steering. As you can see now, the gauges are below 35 bar. This means you don't have enough pre-pressure to drive on a highway or public roads. To increase the pressure on these 2 gauges, you have to steer the middle model only. This means we have to close both valves and steer the center model once to the left and once to the right. Then you will have more than 35 bar pressure on M5 and on M6. Here you can find a sticker which explains how to use the valve. Pull both valves to control the rear steering, push both valves to control the center steering, open the outer valve and close the inner valve to control the front steering or to drive on public roads. Between the axles you can find a yellow and a blue lever. The yellow lever is your shock absorber. If you close it down, you will cut off the nitrogen from the suspension system. When you're driving on the public roads, always open that lever. Open is to the outside of the trailer. The same is for the blue lever. Push it in to close, pull it to open. The blue lever will shut off your suspension system of that one axle. Your blue lever will always be on the inside of the axle. In that blue lever, there is also a parachute valve. If some hose bursts, the trailer will not tip over if the parachute valve closes. Next to that, we can also find our center points. If the 2 yellow points match, that would mean the steering of those axles is straight. So to line up the trailer, make sure that those 2 points match. This is also indicated by the 3 lights on the wireless remote control. This is the remote steering. You have 4 buttons on this one. The two upper buttons are there to control the front steering. The two lower buttons are there to control the rear steering. You can also find three lights. The first light will turn on when your truck is straight in front of your gooseneck. The second light will turn on when your front steering is aligned. The right light will turn on when your rear steering is aligned. You can plug in this plug in front of your gooseneck, in the middle of the center model, and on the rear of the trailer. By plugging it in, means you put it in and turn it to the right. You will feel a click and it is connected. To control your middle steering, make sure the valves in the center model are set to the position to control the middle steering. Then you can use the same buttons over here as you use for the rear steering. Just push one to the left and one to the right until your center steering is straight. There is no fourth light for the center steering, but you can see this on the two yellow pinpoints in the middle model. This is a pendulum axle. It basically means there is no connection between the left side of the trailer and the right side of the trailer. You have two small axles, one on the left and one on the right. You will also have four braking drums in one line of the trailer, one axle line. If you look in here, you have one on the right side, one on the left side. In here you can see the cylinder, which is connected to the lower arm of the pendulum axle. Make sure this area is clean at all times, because it could break the greasing point or the suspension lines. To lift up an axle, we first go down completely with our trailer. When our trailer is down, we will close our number 6 valve and put in our pit. After that, we can go up with our trailer. Your axle will be lifted from the ground. This you can do for all the axles of the trailer. This is our pony motor. A dipstick for the oil you can find over here. This lever makes it easier for the pony motor to start when you put it in start position. When you want to work, put it in work position over here. This tank is filled with hydraulic oil. The tank on the left side of the pony motor is filled with diesel. To extend the HighwayMax, we apply this button first, the yellow one, and you will see a pin come out. After that, we will apply the brakes of the center model so it will stay here and we can drive forward with the first three axles. Perfect. Whether the trailer is extended or not, always be sure that the pin is completely in before you drive on the roads. And after that, release the brakes. Now you're ready to go. This is our nitrogen booster. You can shim our booster in the front and also in the back. Always try to get the booster as straight as possible at all times. The cylinders of the booster have two positions, an upper position and a lower position. The difference of those two positions you can see on the load chart inside the box. In here you can find the control panel of the booster. This lever we use to put pressure on those two cylinders on top. It will pressurize the booster or lift the booster, depending the position of this lever. You can see here load trailer or load booster. In here you can find the computer of the booster. You can switch it on with this button and switch it off when you're finished driving. When you switch the booster on, you press start to activate the booster. To steer the booster, you can push this button or this button, but you can only do that when the booster is in the air, not when it's on the ground. Now we're gonna lower and raise the booster. Before that, we will turn on the pony motor. In here you can find a gauge for the air pressure on the airbags of the booster. On top of the door there is a load chart which compares the pressure with the pressure on the ground. Here you can find the gauge for the accumulator pressure. And here we will find the cylinder to steer the booster left and right. Make sure that the booster is off the ground before we steer. We unplug this pin over here, switch the cylinder to the side, plug it in, unplug this pin, put it over here, and now we can steer the booster. To unhook our trailer, make sure that lever CG is in the downwards position. After that, we will turn down the legs. After turning down the legs, we will lower our gooseneck until the leg is supporting on the ground. If our legs are on the ground, we need to upper our gooseneck until it comes off the fifth wheel. Now you can open the fifth wheel and drive away. Thank you for watching this training video. Faymonville, trailers to the max.